All right, so I want to show you what we need to do for those 3D scans that we did. So I put them on the Y drive, I believe that's the drive number. And so they're all right here. And so what you're going to do is copy yours to your folder. And then in ZBrush, you're going to import your model. So I'm going to import the model, 3D scans. And I will just grab this one here, that's mine. You may get something that says, imported mesh contains unused vertices, quads and triangles, blah, blah, blah. Just hit yes. Whatever gets the model in there, that's what you want. Imported mesh contains 4,000 blah, blah, blah vertices which have been removed. Basically, it does the 3D scan. There's some kind of points floating in space. All those points are not needed, so then it eliminates them. That's what that's telling us it's doing. So we can just hit OK. So my model is here. I need to drag it onto my canvas. Once it's there, I'm going to hit T. That makes it editable. Remember, if you don't hit T, then it starts doing this business, and then you realize you have to hit T, and then it does that. Okay? T is this edit mode. So if you don't see that edit mode clicked, that's what's doing. If you do this, you just go to color and say clear, and then they all go away, and you just have the one there. Okay? So most likely your first job in this is going to be to straighten it out. You can see how mine is already kind of crooked, so it needs to straighten out. So move, scale, and rotate. You guys are fortunate. This version of ZBrush has awesome move, scale, and rotates. I'm not even going to show you what they look like before. So I'm just going to click and drag and then hold shift to spin around so I can get this at somewhat of an angle. And then straighten it up this way. And then straighten it up that way. Spin around the other direction, straighten it up this way. Spin it around again. I'm just trying to make it, obviously, just like level. That's good. All right, that's good. Okay. All right, so now that it's there, I'm going to go back to my draw, which is Q. And then anything that doesn't belong in here, like this little stand, the box that I scanned on, I need to eliminate that. So under my brushes here, there are several brushes you could do for erasing stuff or moving stuff. Like I could use the move brush. We're not going to do this. I could use the move brush to like tuck this in, but that's like kind of a sloppy way to do it. I want a perfectly flat item. Let's say this is something I scanned. Eventually I want to print it, or I want to put it inside my scene. I want to have a perfectly flat bottom. So I'm not sure why. In this model, I can't use the slice. Typically, I would use the slice for this. It doesn't want to work. So I'm going to use the trim. And I hit OK. So there's 3 trims down here, or several trims. Trim circle, curve, dynamic, lasso, and trim rectangle. Okay? They all do essentially the same thing. They're all going to trim or cut stuff off. The curve one is basically just a straight line that goes across. Okay? Now to access it, I have to hold down Control and then Shift, and then it should say trim curve up here. If it doesn't, I let go of Control Shift, and then I do it again, and then it'll say it. When I click and drag, you'll see a dotted line, and then you'll see a black gradation. Whatever the black gradation is on, that's the side that's going to go away. So if I did this right here, it would just chop off that area. Okay? If I did it the other way, I drug this way, you see which way the black gradation is going, it would chop it that way. Now it's gone. Okay? The cool thing too with this is that it works like your Photoshop brushes or marquee. If you hold the space bar after you started drawing, you could then move it around and get it exactly where you want it lined up. So I want this lined up pretty much to the bottom of that. And that should trim it nice and neat. There we go. And there it is. Now, the one reason I don't typically like to use the trim brush is because of this. Oops, let me flip this around. There we go. So let's say I just wanted to cut the top of this. It's too tall. If I cut this off, what ZBrush will do is it cuts it, and then it just like fills in that area. So now it's like filled in, which a second ago it wasn't filled in. So the trim brush does that. The slice brush, which is the one I said I typically use, doesn't do that. But for whatever reason on this file today, it just doesn't want to work. So I went to slice, nothing happens. I probably have something clicked or not clicked that I should have. These other ones too, like trim lasso, work the same kind of way. So you can just kind of like draw a section, and then that will slice that section, and then you can see how it would keep that area. So if there was something like a specific shape or something you want to cut out, you could definitely use it for that. Typically, I just use my trim for doing that kind of stuff. All right, so it's cut out. I may want to adjust some of the shape of this. You can see that as it scanned it, that it kind of left like this blotchy area here. The top of it isn't very crisp. There's also some messy stuff right here. There was something else that looked weird. Oh yeah, from the top view, you can see that this is not perfectly rectangular. You can see how it kind of tapers upwards, right? So I want to adjust that as well. So the requirements for this is I just want you to go in here and make some adjustments. Clean it up. You're going to put it on a platform, and then just make some adjustments. Put a little design to it, right? So I'm just going to pull this over, and that will help straighten out that. That's maybe a little bit too much. There we go. And I'm going to flip it to the bottom side and just make sure the same thing down here, that's nice and moved over. Cool. This part here looks pretty rough. You can see how that doesn't look. No. That doesn't look very smooth. I'm going to hit polyframe over here to see where my divisions are and make sure that I have enough points. If there's no points there, it's not going to work, but there are, so I'm going to hold down Shift and just click and drag, and that'll help smooth out any like weird points that are there. Shift, which is a smooth tool. So any tool you're in, as long as you hold Shift, that will smooth it out. When you hold Alt, it does the opposite of wherever the tool is. Move, you don't really see a huge benefit, but like for the standard brush, regular standard pulls out, holding Alt and dragging pushes in. Okay. Oh, this? Yep, you just go to Lightbox. It'll close it. I also want to clean up some of this stuff. So in some areas, if I go to smooth, let's say, and I start smoothing this out, this isn't going to make it any better because there's actually like a little like pocket or something in there. So I'm going to turn on Dynamesh. This also looks kind of wobbly too, so let's just fix that real quick. Make this brush bigger. There we go, that's better. Okay, so under Geometry, under Dynamesh, I'm going to turn this on. And this is what I had you guys use on the 3D print model, was this Dynamesh thing. So I'm going to try to find a good enough resolution here, something like 1000. Polish, project, and then Dynamesh. And then what that should do is it should fill this area in. If it doesn't, then I can kind of tweak it and get it to fill in. This may be too many divisions because I'm looking at 2 million points, so I may want to hit escape, or I'll just kind of see where it's at. If you have too many points, it's very difficult to work with the geometry because as you smooth and tweak and do that kind of stuff, it's very fine detail. We don't have a lot of overall stuff. So we'll just see. There's 2 million points, yeah. So it definitely kept it, but I think now when I go to smooth, it'll smooth it out. And you can see it's very difficult to smooth it because of how many points there actually are. So I'm going to hit undo. There we go. I'm going to go back to maybe 500. I'm going to turn off project and then do Dynamesh. There we go. Let's try that again. It's still there. All right, that pocket is still there, so I'm going to use my clay buildup brush and just kind of fill that area in. Then hold Control and then drag out. And then smooth out again. And you can see eventually what I'll be able to do is just clean that area up enough where it doesn't look horrible. There we go. And I may want to also use my clay buildup to kind of push stuff in. Okay, so anytime I want my Dynamesh to rebuild, I can just Control drag. I can even lower my resolution, turn it off, turn it back on. Okay, so I'm just going to clean up some of this. That's just maybe a little bit too messy. Let me turn the polish off. There we go. I was trying to get to a manageable amount of points so that as I'm like smoothing it out, it doesn't go crazy. There we go. All right, I'm going to go with my clay buildup brush and I'm just going to hold Alt and just kind of push this in. Smooth out some of that, smooth out some of this. All right. So there, it's pretty clean. Now if I wanted to add anything else, I could, you know, write my initials on here. Not like that, but like better. And then do that. And you'll see how it blends in the edges. So now when I smooth it, it actually looks like it's part of the surface. Oops. And then I can use the Damien standard brush or the Dam standard brush. I'm going to pull out like a crest. That's kind of cool. With a tablet, this definitely works a lot better. There we go. Wonderful. All right, so I did some modifications to this. It's obvious. So now let me put a platform in there. So everything inside of ZBrush is built basically on layers. So when I created my model here, it puts it on what's called a subtool, which is basically just like that's your model. So if I wanted to add a base into this, I'm going to go to Append, and I'm going to add a cylinder into my shape. Okay, now the cylinder comes in on a separate layer, separate subtool, so I need to click on the cylinder, then I can go to rotate, and then I can rotate this around, and your shift key will work as a snap, so you can snap it perfectly. And what I'm going to do is try to resize this so it fits. One of the sucky things about this software, I can't click and drag. It's going to work now apparently. It did not work before. I couldn't click and drag before and drag this in and scale it. It just wasn't working. It wasn't doing anything. But what I can do is if I hold Alt and I click on the green, it'll, oops, not the green, sorry. Oh, it is a green. Yeah. There it goes. Okay. So it's scaling it just in the two directions, and then I can grab the Y and scale it down like this. Grab the Alt, and drag it, there we go. And then I'm just going to kind of position this so that it's centered. There we go. So I would do more to this besides just my initials in there, but that's for now. Then I can hit Control D a couple times to get rid of these ridges, because that looks pretty ugly. And I can go back to my draw tool. There we go. Okay. And then I could draw on this too. Now one of the cool things about ZBrush is the ability to do not only just mirrored symmetry. If I'm doing something on this side, it'll copy it to that side. But I can do radial symmetry, which a lot of the softwares don't have. Under Transform, I go to Activate Symmetry. I tell it the direction. You can kind of look at it and see which direction it's going. If I just kind of move this around, you can see where it's at, like where the other one is. So this looks like it's doing the correct direction. Oops, it's in X still though. I want this to be radial in the Y direction. Nope, in the X direction. Nope, in the Z direction. One of these directions. There we go. So now you can see how I have these 8 points that are basically whatever I do in one spot, it'll do in the other spot. So if I wanted to tweak this shape, I have a lot of control over what I can do to this. So if I wanted to have this thing maybe like little risers here, I can do that. Maybe pull these sides down. And you can see how just like that's pretty awesome. Now it didn't do it all the way around. It's kind of weird. I think my center point might be off. Let's move this. I'm going to reset that to where it's supposed to be, and then, whoops. Oh, I messed up now what I hit. Rotate, yes. Edit draw. There you go. I don't know what I hit. All right. Let's go to rotate again. I'm going to turn off my symmetry and then rotate this back to 90. Hit T, hit Q, turn my symmetry back on with X. If it's still like off, that's weird. T. Alright, just being stupid. Whatever. Alright, so I can use this as a way to put that back down to where it was. Move, yes. Get down on the ground. There we go. Back to draw. There we go, back to move. Alright, looks like it's behaving correctly now. So it just wasn't in the right spot. I moved it too far away from the original spot. Yeah, so you can do a lot of cool stuff with this. If you had something that was really circular and you wanted to make sure everything kind of matched all the way around it, very quickly you can do that. This is the benefit of using Dynamesh over other things. So as I start moving and pushing and pulling this, you can see there's a definite like stretching of the points there. If I turn on my polyframe, you can see here's the points for this, and then here them being stretched. If I add more divisions to this, so I hit Control D, it adds more divisions to the entire thing, but this still stays looking ugly. If I change this to a Dynamesh shape, Dynamesh will recognize that I've made something kind of like outside the original box, and it'll add, no, don't do that. It'll add more divisions here. So once I click that Dynamesh button and hit no, you can see how many more divisions are now in this spot. Oops. So now as I start to play with this, it changes the shape of that. Okay, so that looks nice and neat now. And then if I get to a point, I can Control drag again, and then Dynamesh will again rebuild. Sometimes you want to have this polish and project on, and what that does is more closely matches your original surface. Sometimes you Dynamesh and you kind of lose detail, and so this kind of helps maintain that detail a bit more. It takes a bit longer, and it's going to create a bit more points, but the results will be a little bit sharper, closer to what you originally had. There we go. You may also find that, like in this case, I'm getting holes in here, which is kind of weird. I normally don't. But under Modify Topology, I could say Close Holes. I'm going to turn my Dynamesh off, then go to Modify Topology and say Close Holes. Oh, they're not holes, they're just stretched out pieces of geometry, that's all it is. There we go. And then I can come back to my trim tool, and I can just trim the bottom of that too. Yes, yes. And now I have like a nice flat area for my stuff to kind of sit on. Oops, turn my symmetry off. There we go. Cool. So there is my beautiful masterpiece, something I scanned, and then I have a little plate for it. So I'm just going to save this, and then this is what you would be turning in, is just your 3D print retouched. Okay, it's basically a one-day project. Today is our last work day. Next class, we're going to be doing our last challenge, and then that's it. Next week, we'll be watching the demo reels. Any questions on this yet? No? It's pretty simple. ZBrush has a lot of other stuff inside there, so it's not just like, that's all we're doing.